I'm Virginia, 34 female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my husband, Leo, in a house we both chose, filled with furniture we both picked out. I work as a forensic accountant, a job that requires a meticulous eye for detail and an appreciation for order, where every number tells a story. Our life, on the surface, was just as orderly, a perfect ledger of shared dreams and balanced accounts. But I was about to discover that a single, devastating entry can throw the entire book out of balance, and that the person I trusted to be my partner was helping someone else cook the books of my own life. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our life was measured in Sunday dinners. Every week, like clockwork, Leo's mother, Beatrice, would arrive at our front door at precisely 5:00 p.m. She carried with her a Jell-O salad or a Tupperware of green beans and an air of quiet, unshakable authority. Beatrice was a retired head librarian, a woman who had spent 40 years ensuring that every book was in its proper place and every patron respected the silence. She carried that same energy into our home, treating it less like a shared space of warmth and more like a new branch of her library that she needed to inspect for overdue fines and misplaced volumes. I tried for years to win her over. I learned to make her favorite pot roast, the one her mother used to make, which she complimented by saying it was a commendable effort. I'd ask about her week, about the book club she ran with an iron fist, about her garden. She would give clipped, precise answers, her eyes constantly scanning our living room. I always felt like I was being graded. A cushion out of place, a stack of mail on the console table, a pair of my shoes left by the door, each was a demerit. Her gaze would linger on these small imperfections with a barely perceptible tightening of her lips, a silent judgment that screamed louder than any criticism. Leo, bless his heart, was oblivious. To him, these were just dinners with his mom. He saw her meticulous nature as endearing, a charming quirk. "That's just Mom," he'd say with a shrug, blind to the way her presence made my shoulders tense up to my ears. "She just likes things to be neat." The tension was most palpable when it came to our finances. Leo was a marketing manager, brilliant with slogans and campaigns, but his approach to money was more abstract. He saw the big picture, the potential for growth, the exciting investments. I, the forensic accountant, saw the line items, the interest rates, the potential for fraud. We had a system that worked for us, or so I thought. We had our separate checking accounts for personal spending and a joint savings account for our future. A bigger house, travel, maybe kids one day. I managed the joint account, a task both Leo and I agreed I was better suited for. I found a certain peace in balancing our statements, in watching our nest egg grow steadily through careful planning. Beatrice, however, saw my role differently. During those Sunday dinners, she would often steer the conversation toward money with all the subtlety of a charging bull. "Leo, darling, did that investment you mentioned pay off?" she'd ask, completely ignoring me. "You have to be so careful these days. It's so easy for money to just disappear if it isn't being watched by the right people." The implication was always clear. I was not the right people. She viewed my personal spending habits with the most scrutiny. I enjoy fashion. I don't buy designer labels every week, but I appreciate quality pieces. My closet was well organized, filled with clothes and shoes I'd bought with my own money from my own account. It was my hobby, my one real indulgence. To Beatrice, it was evidence of a fatal flaw in my character. She'd watch me clear the table in a new blouse and comment, "Another new top, Virginia? You must have a closet bursting at the seams." Leo would laugh it off. "Virginia has great taste, Mom. She works hard, she can buy herself nice things." But I could see the seed of doubt Beatrice was planting in his mind. Her words were like water dripping on a stone, slowly eroding his confidence in me. The phrase she loved most was fiscally irresponsible. She'd drop it into conversations casually. I was reading an article about how many young couples are drowning in debt because of frivolous spending. It's so important to be with someone who is fiscally responsible. Each time, she'd give me a pointed, knowing look. I was the frivolous spender. I was the one who was going to drag her precious son down. It didn't matter that I made a six-figure salary, that I contributed more than my half to our savings, that my own retirement accounts were flourishing. In her narrative, I was a liability. The final Sunday dinner. Before my world shattered was particularly tense. I had just received a significant bonus at work for uncovering a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme at a client's company. I was proud, and I'd celebrated by buying a beautiful pair of leather boots I'd wanted for months. I wore them to dinner. Beatrice's eyes locked onto them the moment I opened the door. She didn't say a word about them for hours. Then, as we were having dessert, she folded her hands on the table and looked at Leo. "Leo," she said, her voice calm and steady, "your father and I always believed in transparency. We had no financial secrets. It's the only way a marriage can truly be a partnership." She then turned her gaze to me, her eyes cold as ice. "Those are lovely boots, Virginia. They must have been very expensive." It wasn't a compliment, it was an accusation. Before I could respond, she continued, looking back at Leo. "I just worry about you, son. You're the one with the vision for the future, and it would be a shame if that vision were clouded by someone else's shopping addiction." The words hung in the air, ugly and venomous. Leo shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom, that's not fair." But his defense was weak, his voice lacking conviction. I felt a cold dread creep into my stomach. She was winning. She was turning my husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner, into her ally against me. The foundation of our perfect life had been fracturing under the pressure of these Sunday dinners for years, and I was just now realizing how deep the cracks truly went. The week after Beatrice's shopping addiction comment was thick with an unspoken tension. Leo was distant, evasive. He'd come home from work, give me a perfunctory kiss, and retreat to his home office, claiming he had deadlines to meet. The easy banter that usually filled our evenings was replaced by a strained silence. When I tried to talk to him about his mother's comment, he waved it away. "You're overthinking it, Virginia," he said, his eyes glued to his laptop screen. "She's from a different generation, she just doesn't get it." But his words felt hollow. It wasn't about her not getting it. It was about the poison she had so successfully dripped into his ear, and the fact that he was letting it fester. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The feeling was like trying to find a single mismatched number in a spreadsheet with thousands of rows, a tiny, nagging error that throws off the final balance, but one you can't immediately locate. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I had to go into the office for a last-minute, all-day meeting with a major client. It was unexpected, so I left the house in a rush, barely having time to grab a coffee. I texted Leo to let him know I'd be home late. He replied with a simple "okay." No "have a good day," no "love you," just "okay." The dread in my stomach intensified. Throughout the day, I was distracted, my mind replaying the Sunday dinner, Beatrice's smug face, Leo's weak defense. By the time I finally got home, it was almost 9 p.m. The house was quiet. I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Mom stopped by to drop off some leftovers. Had to work late. See you in the morning." My heart sank. Beatrice had been here, alone, in my house. A cold wave of anxiety washed over me. I walked through the downstairs rooms first. Everything seemed to be in its place. The mail was still on the console table. The cushions on the sofa were perfectly fluffed, too perfectly. That was her signature move. Then I went upstairs. Our bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and my breath caught in my throat. My closet doors were wide open. I am meticulous about my closet. Everything is color-coded. Shoes are arranged in neat rows on their shelves. Handbags are stuffed with tissue paper to keep their shape. It's my sanctuary, my perfectly ordered little world. But now it was in disarray. Hangers were askew. A stack of sweaters was slightly toppled. My shoe boxes were not perfectly aligned. It wasn't chaos, but it was disturbed. It was the work of someone who had tried to put things back but didn't know the system. Someone had been in my closet. Someone had been going through my things. I felt a profound sense of violation, a sickness rising from my gut. My private space, the one place in the house that was truly mine, had been invaded. I knew with absolute certainty who had done it. Beatrice. She had used Leo's key. She had come into my home under the guise of dropping off leftovers and conducted her own little investigation into my supposed addiction. I walked over to my dresser, where I kept my jewelry box. It was closed, but when I opened it, I could see that the delicate chains of my necklaces were slightly more tangled than I'd left them. She had been through everything. She had touched my clothes, my shoes, my jewelry, assessing their value, building her case against me. I felt physically ill. I san. Kay onto the edge of our bed, my mind racing. What had she said to Leo? What new lies had she spun? The pieces started to click into place. Leo's distance, his late nights at work, his curt text messages. He knew. He had let her do this. Or worse, he had been a part of it. I immediately went to my laptop and pulled up our joint savings account statement, needing the comfort of seeing our hard work, our shared future, sitting there safe and sound. My fingers trembled as I typed in the password. The page loaded. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. The balance was a fraction of what it should have been. Tens of thousands of dollars were gone. I clicked on the transaction history, my heart hammering against my ribs. There it was, dated 2 days ago. Wire transfer to L. Sterling personal account. L. Sterling, Leo Sterling. He had emptied our joint savings account. He had taken the money we had both worked so hard to save, our future, and moved it into his own private account. And at the bottom of the page, there was a new notification in the account message center. I clicked it open. It was a formal letter from the bank. Dear Ms. Miller, this letter is to confirm that, as per the request of the primary account holder, Mr. Leo Sterling, your name has been removed from joint savings account XXXXX. You no longer have access or signing authority for this account. I had been locked out. My name was gone. It was all gone. The violation of my closet was nothing compared to this. This was a complete and utter betrayal. The wardrobe audit had just been the preliminary hearing. This was the verdict and the sentencing, delivered behind my back. My husband and his mother had declared me incompetent, a financial risk, and had stripped me of my own money to protect me from myself. I sat there in the silence of our bedroom, the faint scent of Beatrice's lavender perfume still hanging in the air, and I felt utterly and completely speechless. The screen of my laptop glowed in the darkroom, the bank statement a testament to my own foolishness. I had seen the red flags. I had felt the shifting dynamics. But I had allowed my love for Leo and my desire for peace to blind me to the conspiracy brewing right under my nose. The person I had vowed to build a life with had dismantled it in a single transaction, all based on the manipulative whispers of his mother. I scrolled through the transaction history again, as if seeing it a second or third time would change the reality of the numbers. It didn't. The balance remained a pathetic shadow of its former self, and the notification of my removal was just as stark, just as cruel. The violation of the closet was personal and invasive, but this was a declaration of war. They hadn't just gone through my belongings, they had seized my assets, my security, my future. They had audited my life and decided to write me off as a loss. For a few minutes, I just sat there, numb. The forensic accountant in me was screaming, demanding action, demanding data, demanding a full audit of this betrayal. But the wife in me was shattered. The life I thought I had, the partnership I believed in, was a lie. Leo wasn't my partner. He was his mother's agent, sent to manage me. My home no longer felt like my own. It was a crime scene, and I was the victim. I thought about confronting him. I pictured myself screaming, crying, throwing the laptop at him, demanding to know how he could do this. But what would that accomplish? He had already made his choice. He had sided with Beatrice. A dramatic confrontation would only give them the satisfaction of seeing me hysterical, further proving their narrative that I was an unstable, emotional woman who couldn't be trusted with money. No, I would not give them that satisfaction. My mind, trained to find the pattern in the chaos, to remain calm and methodical in the face of financial disaster, slowly began to take over. The initial shock receded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Crying wouldn't get my money back. Emotion was a liability right now. I needed assets. I needed a strategy. I closed the banking window and leaned back, taking a deep, steadying breath. Leo would be home in the morning, expecting to find me either oblivious or distraught. I would be neither. I needed to act normal. I went back to my closet and with methodical precision, put everything back in its rightful place. I straightened the sweaters, aligned the shoes, and closed the doors. I erased every trace of Beatrice's intrusion. I then went to the kitchen, took the Tupperware of leftovers out of the fridge, and dumped them into the trash. I washed the container and set it by the door, ready to be returned. By the time I climbed into bed, our room looked exactly as it had when I'd left that morning. I was a ghost in my own home, erasing my own discovery of the crime. When Leo finally came in, long after midnight, I pretended to be asleep. I felt the bed dip as he sat down to taa. Key off his shoes. He was quiet, trying not to wake me. The guilt was radiating off him in waves. Good, I thought, let him feel it. The next morning, I was up before him. I made coffee, just like I always did. I greeted him with a calm, neutral smile as he walked into the kitchen, looking exhausted and wary. "Morning," I said, my voice even. "You got in late." He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, sorry, it was a brutal night at the office." He was a terrible liar. I simply nodded, handing him a cup of coffee. Beatrice left her container. "Don't forget to give it back to her." His eyes flickered with panic for a split second before he masked it. "Oh, right, yeah, I'll do that." He was watching me, waiting for the explosion, for the tears, for the accusation. I gave him nothing. I talked about my day, the boring client meeting. I asked about his. I was the perfect, unsuspecting wife. His relief was palpable. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He thought I was so financially clueless that I wouldn't notice tens of thousands of dollars and my name missing from our life savings. The insult was almost as painful as the theft itself. He truly saw me as the caricature his mother had painted. A flighty, fashion-obsessed woman who didn't understand the serious business of money. He had no idea that I spent my days sifting through complex financial records, hunting for discrepancies far more cleverly hidden than his clumsy wire transfer. He left for work, giving me a quick, hesitant kiss on the cheek. "Have a good day," he said. "You too," I replied, my smile never wavering. The moment the door closed behind him, my composure dropped. My mission was clear. They had reduced my share of our shared life to a balance of zero. They thought they had all the assets. They were wrong. I had an asset they had completely underestimated, my brain. I went to my home office and closed the door. It was time to start my own audit. An audit of my husband, of his mother, and of the last 10 years of my life. My grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was now overlaid with something else, something harder and more powerful: determination. The shock had passed. The violation had been recorded. The account of my marriage had been closed. It was time to open a new one, a ledger of payback, and I knew exactly where to begin my investigation. It started with a memory, a detail Leo had shared years ago and long since forgotten. A small, loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of his and his mother's finances. The kind of thread that, when pulled, could unravel everything. The memory that surfaced through the fog of my anger and betrayal was from years ago, shortly after Leo and I got engaged. We were at Beatrice's house for one of our first Sunday dinners as a soon-to-be-married couple. Leo was trying to impress upon me how financially savvy his mother was. "You know," he'd said proudly, "Mom handles everything for Grandpa Joe's estate. She set up this special trust for him years ago so he'd be taken care of in his nursing home. She manages all the investments and pays all his bills from it. She's amazing with money." At the time, I'd thought it was sweet. Beatrice, the dutiful daughter, managing her elderly father's finances. But now, filtered through the lens of her deception and greed, the memory took on a sinister new meaning. Beatrice, the woman who accused me of being fiscally irresponsible, was in sole control of her father's entire estate. An estate that, from what Leo had bragged about, was quite substantial, built from a lifetime of frugal living and smart property investments. Grandpa Joe was in his late 90s and had severe dementia. He wouldn't have the first clue what was happening with his money. It was the perfect opportunity for someone with a flexible moral compass. This was my starting point, the loose thread. My professional instincts took over completely. I logged into my work database, which gave me access to a host of public records and financial search tools that ordinary people didn't have. I started by looking up property records for Beatrice and her father, Joseph Miller. As expected, Joseph's longtime family home had been sold 5 years prior. I found the sale price, a hefty $850,000. That money should have gone directly into the trust Leo had mentioned. My next search was for the trust itself. Financial trusts, especially irrevocable ones set up for elder care, often have to be registered and leave a public footprint. It took me a few hours of digging through county records, but I found it. The Joseph Miller Irrevocable Trust. And as Leo had said, the sole trustee, the person with complete control over every dollar, was Beatrice Sterling. The next step was the hard part, getting a look inside that trust. Without a court order, bank records are sealed. But forensic accountants have ways of seeing the shape of something without looking directly at it. You follow the money as it moves. Out, I couldn't see the trust statements, but I could track where its money went. I started searching for major purchases or financial activities linked to Beatrice in the 5 years since that house was sold. I cross-referenced property records, vehicle registrations, and business filings. The first hit was a small one, a brand new luxury SUV purchased by Beatrice 3 years ago. Price tag, $75,000, paid in cash. A retired librarian on a modest pension doesn't just drop that kind of money on a car. It was suspicious, but not damning. But it was a thread. I kept pulling. I expanded my search to include Leo. He and I had always been transparent about our finances, or so I thought. I knew his salary, his bonuses. I also knew we'd been saving aggressively, not making lavish purchases. Yet a public records search brought up something that made my blood run cold. 2 years ago, Leo had become the sole owner of a shell corporation, LS Marketing Solutions, LLC. I had never heard of it. An LLC, or limited liability company, is a common way to do business, but it's also a classic tool for moving money around and obscuring its source. My heart was pounding now. I called my best friend, Samantha, the private investigator. I told her everything: the closet, the savings account, Beatrice, the trust, and now this mysterious LLC. Sam was quiet for a moment, and then she said in a voice dripping with professional fury, "Virginia, he messed with the wrong accountant. I'm on it. Give me 24 hours." While Sam started her deep dive, I focused on what I could access. I still had the login information for our old joint credit card, the one we rarely used but kept for emergencies. I hadn't thought to check it before. I logged in. The recent transaction history was mostly dormant, as expected. But then I started scrolling back, year by year, and there it was, a pattern. Every few months, there would be a large payment made from our joint checking account, the one Leo also had access to this credit card, followed by a cash advance for the exact same amount. These transactions were buried among our normal expenses. Leo had been systematically taking cash advances against our shared credit line, then paying it off with our shared money, effectively taking cash out of our finances without it showing up as a direct withdrawal from the bank. It was clever, and it was designed to be overlooked. Where did that cash go? Into his pocket or somewhere else? The next afternoon, Sam called me back. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice grim. "LS Marketing Solutions LLC has one client, just one. It gets paid a monthly consulting fee like clockwork." She paused for dramatic effect. "The client is the Joseph Miller Irrevocable Trust." I sank into my chair, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. The picture was becoming horribly clear. Beatrice wasn't just siphoning her father's money for luxury cars. She was funneling it through a fake company set up by her own son, disguised as a legitimate business expense from the trust. Leo wasn't just a weak-willed husband manipulated by his mother. He was an active, willing co-conspirator in a long-term scheme to defraud his own grandfather. The money he had taken from our savings account wasn't just to lock me out. It was likely seed money for a new venture, or perhaps to cover his tracks. The shopping addiction wasn't the reason for their betrayal, it was the excuse. The convenient, ready-made narrative they created to justify cutting me out before I got too close, before my accountant's eyes saw the numbers that didn't add up. They weren't protecting Leo from me, they were protecting their criminal enterprise from me. The paper trail didn't just lead to a stolen savings account. It led to years of systematic elder fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. And I had it all. For the next few days, I operated on two separate tracks. On one, I was the dutiful, oblivious wife. I continued my morning routine with Leo, making small talk, acting as if the world hadn't been pulled out from under my feet. He was growing more confident in my ignorance, the guilt in his eyes being replaced by a casual sort of pity. He probably thought I was blissfully swiping my credit card at the mall, proving his mother's point with every imaginary purchase. The condescension was infuriating, but it was also the perfect cover. Every moment he underestimated me was a moment I gained. On the other track, I was a forensic accountant on the most important case of my life. My home office became my war room. With the information from Sam and my own digging, I began to assemble a portfolio of their crimes, a financial story so clear and damning it could be read by a child. My first task was to quantify the full extent of the fraud. I created a spreadsheet. Column A was for assets in, the initial $850,000 from the sale of Grandpa Joe's house. Column B was for legitimate expenses, the monthly bills for his high-end nursing home, which I verified with a discreet call to their billing department, pretending to be a family friend updating their records. Column C was for fraudulent withdrawals. This column grew at an alarming rate. There was the $75,000 for Beatrice's SUV. Then there were the monthly consulting fees paid to Leo's shell company. Over 2 years, these payments totaled a staggering $120,000. Leo had been receiving a secret, tax-free salary of $5,000 a month from his grandfather's trust. I kept digging. I found records of high-end vacations Beatrice had taken, trips to Europe and cruises to Alaska, all paid for during the same period. I couldn't definitively link them to the trust without bank statements, but the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. A retired librarian was not globetrotting on her pension. Next, I looked into where the money had gone. Sam's investigation into LS Marketing Solutions, LLC, revealed it had a business bank account, with Leo as the sole signatory. From there, the money trail split. A significant portion had been transferred directly into Leo's personal checking account, the same one he had likely moved our joint savings into. But another, more interesting portion was being used to pay the mortgage on a small condominium in a trendy part of the city. I did a property search. The owner of the condo was not Leo Sterling. The owner was Beatrice Sterling. She had bought it 3 years ago with a large down payment. The monthly mortgage payments were being made by her son's fake company, using her father's stolen money. Beatrice didn't just have a secret slush fund, she had a secret property, an investment paid for by fraud. This was the key. It was a tangible asset, a piece of evidence that couldn't be explained away. It was their biggest liability. With all the evidence compiled, property deeds, LLC registration documents, a detailed timeline of the cash advances from our credit card, and a precise accounting of the money stolen from the trust, I started to formulate my plan. I wasn't just going to expose them. I wanted to dismantle their entire world with the same cold, methodical precision they had used to dismantle mine. I wanted them to feel the same powerlessness I had felt when I saw that zero balance. My revenge would not be a screaming match. It would be a presentation, a final audit from which there was no appeal. I consulted with Sam's legal contacts discreetly to understand my options. Because Leo had moved assets out of our joint account before any talk of separation, it was a clear case of financial dissipation. And the elder fraud was a serious criminal offense. I had leverage, and it was time to decide how to use it. My plan crystallized around a single event, Beatrice's upcoming 66th birthday party. She was planning a celebratory dinner at a fancy restaurant, a showcase for her friends and family of her comfortable, respectable life. It was the perfect stage. It was public, it was her special occasion, and it would be utterly humiliating for her to be exposed in front of her entire social circle. I began preparing. I created a simple, elegant PowerPoint presentation. The first slide was a picture of Grandpa Joe, smiling in his younger days. The following slides were a simple, devastating flow chart showing how the money from his house sale flowed into the trust, then out to Beatrice's car, her vacations, and Leo's shell corporation, which in turn paid the mortgage on her secret condo. I embedded copies of the property deeds, the LLC registration, the bank transfer confirmations. I printed everything out, compiling it all into several thick, professionally bound folders, each one labeled The Sterling Family Audit. The final piece of my plan involved our own house, the house we had bought together. Leo had put down a larger share of the down payment from an inheritance he'd received years before we met. It was one of the reasons he probably felt so entitled to control our finances. But I had made every single mortgage payment for the last 5 years from my own salary, a fact I had meticulously documented. With the help of Jessica, a lawyer friend Sam recommended, I drew up a settlement agreement. It was simple. I would get the house free and clear. Leo would sign it over, along with a certified check for every penny he had taken from our joint savings account, plus interest. In exchange for his signature, I would agree not to press criminal charges for the fraud against his grandfather. One of the bound folders was for him. The others were for the rest of the family who would be at that dinner. He would have a choice: sign my agreement quietly and walk away with his freedom and a shred of dignity, or I would distribute the folders to everyone at the table and call the police from the restaurant. His assets, his liabilities. The choice was his. The night of Beatrice's birthday dinner, I felt a strange, unnerving calm. I chose my outfit with deliberate care, a sharp, dark blue dress that was professional and elegant. It was one of the first expensive pieces I had ever bought for myself when I got a promotion years ago. It felt like armor. Leo, who had been walking on eggshells around me for weeks, seemed relieved that I was not only willing to attend his mother's party, but seemed to be in a good mood. "You look amazing, Virginia," he said, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "I'm glad we can be here for her." I just smiled back. Of course, it's a special night, I wouldn't miss it. In the car, I carried a large, beautiful gift bag. It was heavy. Leo assumed it was a lavish gift for his mother, a peace offering perhaps. He had no idea the bag contained 5 thick, bound copies of his family's financial ruin. We arrived at the restaurant, a high-end Italian place with white tablecloths and hushed lighting. Beatrice's closest friends and a few family members were already there. She was at the head of the table, holding court, looking regal and smug. She greeted me with a cool, dismissive nod. "Virginia, how nice of you to come." Throughout the appetizers and small talk, I played my part. I was gracious and polite. I listened to stories about Beatrice's book club and complimented her friends on their outfits. I could feel Leo relaxing beside me, believing the storm had passed, that his little problem, me, had been successfully managed. He put his hand on my knee under the table, a gesture of ownership, of reconciliation. I wanted to recoil, but I let it stay there. It would make what was coming next all the more impactful. When the main courses were cleared and the waiter was taking dessert orders, I knew it was time. I cleared my throat and the table quieted down. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I'd like to say a few words for the birthday girl." Beatrice preened, a self-satisfied smile on her face. Leo squeezed my knee, encouragingly. I stood up and reached into the gift bag at my feet. I pulled out one of the bound folders and placed it on the table in front of Beatrice. "Beatrice," I said, my eyes locking onto hers, "you have always been very concerned with financial responsibility. You value transparency and good bookkeeping, so I thought the most fitting gift for you would be a full, independent audit." Her smile faltered. Confusion flickered across her face. Leo's hand dropped from my knee. I then walked around the table, placing a folder in front of Leo's uncle, his aunt, and his own sister. The mood at the table shifted instantly from celebratory to tense. Finally, I placed the last folder directly in front of Leo. Next to it, I placed the settlement agreement and a pen. "Leo," I said softly, so only he could hear. "That's for you. You have until the end of my speech to sign it." I returned to the head of the table and opened my own copy of the folder, which I had connected to a small, portable projector I'd set up discreetly on the table, aimed at a blank wall behind Beatrice. "I call this presentation the Sterling Family Audit," I announced to the stunned table. I clicked the first slide. A large, happy picture of Grandpa Joe filled the wall. It all starts with a man named Joseph Miller, a beloved father and grandfather. Beatrice gasped, her face turning pale. I walked them through it all. The sale of the house, the trust, the flow chart showing the money being siphoned off. I put up the deed for Beatrice's secret condo. A murmur went through the family members. Her own sister looked at her with dawning horror. I put up the registration for LS Marketing Solutions, LLC, with Leo's name clearly listed as the sole proprietor. I could feel his gaze burning into me, a mixture of disbelief and pure terror. For 2 years, I explained, my voice devoid of emotion, Beatrice and Leo have been systematically embezzling money from their own elderly, vulnerable father and grandfather. They conspired to create a fake company to launder the funds, which paid for Beatrice's secret real estate investment. I paused, letting the information sink in. The silence in the private dining room was absolute. Beatrice's friends looked mortified, slowly pushing their chairs back from the table as if from a bad smell. And when they got worried that their scheme might be discovered, I continued, turning to look directly at Leo, they decided I was a liability, so they invented a story, a shopping addiction. They used this fabrication as an excuse to steal my money, to seize our joint savings, to cut me out of my own life, all to protect their criminal secret. I looked back at Leo's signature page. He was staring at it, his hand trembling. His uncle was reading the folder in front of him, his face a mask of cold fury. Beatrice was shaking her head, whispering, "No, it's not true." But the evidence was right there, in black and white, in 5 identical folders. "Sign it, Leo," I said, my voice low but firm. "Sign it, or this presentation, along with these folders, goes directly to the district attorney's office. You will be charged with financial dissipation, conspiracy, and felony elder fraud. You will go to prison." He looked from me to his mother, who offered no help, her face a crumpled mask of despair. With a shaking hand, he picked up the pen and signed every page. He pushed the document back toward me. I calmly packed up my projector, took the signed agreement, and left the gift bag with the remaining folders on the table. As I walked out of the restaurant, I didn't look back. I could hear the shouting begin behind me. The final presentation was over. The account was settled. Leaving the restaurant that night felt like walking out of a burning building into cool, clean air. I didn't feel triumph or joy, just a profound and quiet sense of release. The heavy weight of the deception, the anger, the hurt, it was all still there, but it was no longer my burden to carry. I had passed it back to its rightful owners, leaving them to sift through the ashes of the lives they had torched with their own greed. I drove to Sam's apartment, where she was waiting with a bottle of very good wine. I handed her the signed settlement agreement. She looked it over, a slow, satisfied grin spreading across her face. "He signed it," she said, half in disbelief. "Every page, Virginia, you magnificent woman, you didn't just win, you liquidated them." We drank the wine, not in celebration, but in quiet acknowledgement of the end of a chapter. The next morning, I had a locksmith come and change the locks on the house. When Leo arrived in the afternoon, his key didn't work. I watched from the window as he stood on the porch, looking lost and defeated. He called my phone. I let it go to voicemail. He eventually left, and I felt nothing but a hollow echo where my love for him used to be. The following days were a whirlwind of legal necessities. With the settlement agreement, the transfer of the house into my name was swift. Leo, under threat of immediate prosecution, complied with every demand. The money he had stolen from our savings was wired back into a new account, one solely in my name, with interest calculated down to the last penny. He had to sell his car and cash out some of his own investments to do it, but he did it. The fear of prison was a powerful motivator. The fallout in the Sterling family was, from what I heard through Sam, catastrophic. Leo's uncle, a man with a rigid moral code, was appalled. He took control of the situation regarding Grandpa Joe. He hired a lawyer and forced Beatrice to dissolve the trust and relinquish all control. Every cent that was left was put into a new, court-supervised trust managed by an impartial third party. Beatrice had to sell her secret condo and her luxury SUV to pay back a portion of what she had stolen. She wasn't prosecuted, a mercy granted only for Grandpa Joe's sake, to spare him the public shame of having his own daughter and grandson arrested for robbing him. But she lost everything else. Her friends, the ones who had witnessed my presentation, ostracized her. Her family looked at her with contempt. She was left with her pension, her Jell-O salads, and the silent, judgmental life she had always inflicted on others. She had audited my closet, and in the end, her own life had been found wanting. Leo moved in with her. I could only imagine the suffocating, silent recrimination in that house. He lost his job shortly after. The reason was officially downsizing, but I have no doubt his uncle made a few calls. A man who conspires to defraud his own grandfather is not someone you want managing your brand. The last I heard, he was doing freelance marketing work from his childhood bedroom in his mother's house. As for me, the first few months were about reclaiming my space and myself. The house felt too big, too quiet at first. It was filled with ghosts of a life that had turned out to be a fiction, so I began to change it. I painted the walls. I sold the heavy, dark furniture Leo and Beatrice had loved and bought pieces that were light and modern. I turned Leo's old office into a yoga studio. I made the house entirely my own. I didn't date, I wasn't interested. My focus was on my work, my friendships, and rediscovering the person I was outside of that marriage. I found a deep satisfaction in my job that I hadn't felt in years. Every file I closed, every fraud I uncovered, felt like a small act of justice, a rebalancing of the universal ledger. About a year later, Sam and I decided to go into business together. We started a consulting firm specializing in forensic accounting and private investigation for complex divorce cases. We called it Balance Sheet Investigations. We were a formidable team. I found the financial skeletons, and she found the real ones. We became the firm you called when you knew your spouse was hiding so. Mething, we helped people like me, who had been deceived and financially abused. We gave them the tools to fight back, the evidence to reclaim their lives. It was the most fulfilling work I had ever done. The books on my old life were officially closed. Every asset had been accounted for, every liability settled. I had faced a total loss, and somehow, by staying true to my own meticulous nature, I had rebuilt everything. My new balance sheet was stronger than ever, because this time, every single line item was my own.